Okay, so I'm joined today by Michael Greger, MD, FACLM. Dr. Greger is a physician, New York Times bestselling author, and internationally recognized speaker on nutrition, food safety, and public health issues. A founding member and fellow of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, Dr. Greger is licensed as a general practitioner specializing in clinical nutrition. He is a graduate of the Cornell University School of Agriculture and Tufts University School of Medicine. In 2017, Dr. Greger was honored with the ACLM Lifestyle Medicine Trailblazer Award and became a diplomat of the American Board of Lifestyle Medicine. His books, How Not to Die, The How Not to Die Cookbook, and How Not to Diet became instant New York Times bestsellers. And in fact, I've had the good chance of reading How Not to Die as well, which is an excellent book. And today we have Dr. Greger joining us here at Fever FM to give us a bit of an insight into nutrition and health. Thank you very much for joining me here today, Dr. Greger.
I'm so happy to be here. How can I help?
So we've got some questions for you. We kind of represent an Asian population here in the UK who it's said suffer with chronic disease at far higher rates than the general population, with particular regard to diabetes, kidney disease, and coronary artery disease. So those are three areas I just like you to keep in mind as we're going through the questions, if at all possible. But first of all, I'd like to start with how much training do doctors typically receive regarding nutrition and its impact on health?
Unfortunately, I can only speak to the situation here in the States. But here, doctors have a severe nutrition deficiency in education. Most doctors are just never taught about the powerful impact nutrition can have on the course of illness. So they graduate without this powerful tool in the medical toolbox. So the average physician gets 19 hours of nutrition training in the United States. That's out of thousands of hours of preclinical instruction. Of course, that's not the only reason. There are institutional barriers here, time constraints, and here in the States, lack of reimbursement. And in general, doctors here just aren't paid for, telling people how to take better care of themselves. Of course, drug companies play a role too in terms of influencing medical education and practice. You can ask your doctor when the last time they were taken out to dinner by Big Broccoli. It's probably been a while.
Okay, so what you're saying is that doctors, at least in the US environment, receive just a handful of hours in the entirety of their college education and potentially even further education beyond that.
Indeed.
So, your organization is dedicated to kind of disseminating the studies and information and knowledge that we have around nutrition out there, and bringing that to the forefront, and hopefully to doctors as well. So, what is missed when treating people with chronic disease without considering what people are eating?
Well, these are the causes. Lifestyle diseases are caused by lifestyle issues. So when we're talking about heart disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, these are diseases that are caused by the choices we make day to day. And so if you don't treat the cause, sure, you can treat some of the symptoms. You can slow down the rate at which your type 2 diabetes will make you go blind and go on dialysis and lose your lower limbs, but you're not going to actually reverse the disease, get rid of the disease, unless you're treating the underlying cause. If you continue to eat and live the same way that got you the disease in the first place, then you're not going to get rid of it. And so doctors are missing this huge opportunity to not just mediate the impact of the disease, but actually reverse the disease, reverse heart disease, reverse high blood pressure, reverse obesity, reverse type 2 diabetes with simple diet and lifestyle changes.
What about reversing coronary artery disease and kidney disease?
Well, I mean, that's kind of how I got into this whole field in the first place. I was just a kid when the doctor sent my grandma home in a wheelchair to die. She had end-stage heart disease. I had somebody bypass surgeries, basically run out of plumbing at some point, confined to a wheelchair, crushing chest pain. Her life was over at age 65. But then you heard about this guy, Nathan Pritikin, one of our early lifestyle medicine pioneers. And what happened next is actually detailed in Pritikin's biography. He talks about Frances Greger, my grandmother. They wheeled her in, and she walked out. The thanks to a healthy diet, though she was given her medical death sentence at age 65, she was able to enjoy another 31 years on this planet till age 96, to continue to enjoy her 6 grandkids, including me. That's why I went into medicine. That's why I started nutritionfacts.org, why I wrote the book How Not to Die, why all the proceeds from all my books are all donated directly to charity. I just want to do for everyone's family what Pritikin did for my family.
Okay, and what was that diet that helped to reverse
so this was a diet. This was a diet centered around whole plant foods. Dr. Dean Ornish in 1990 proved in the first randomized controlled trial. I mean, Pritikin had been reversing heart disease for decades, but we didn't have really proof, because there's really only at that point there was really only a clinical diagnosis. So if someone had crushing chest pain on exertion, they'd suppose you had heart disease, and then when it went away after eating healthier, then you don't have heart disease. But until we got to look inside the arteries with something called quantitative angiography, where you can inject vein dyes into the arteries surrounding the heart, and you actually visualize and show that you randomize people to a healthy diet, a diet centered around plant foods, and you open up arteries without drugs, without surgery, reversing the disease. And that those studies have since been replicated by other research groups. And so the healthiest diet is one that decreases the intake of meat, eggs, dairy, and processed junk, maximize the intake of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, which are beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, which South Asians excel in, as well as nuts and seeds and herbs and spices, mushrooms, basically real food that grows out of the ground. These are our healthiest choices.
And is this a low-fat diet then, I take it? Or
So naturally it's a low-fat diet. There are some high-fat whole plant foods such as avocados, nuts, and seeds. But in general, these diets do tend to get between 10 and 20% calories from fat, which is extraordinarily low fat compared to what most of the Western world is currently eating, but really more kind of on par with what we evolved to be eating naturally.
Okay, and I also read that there's a bit of a discrepancy between what's being typically described in the medical literature as a low-fat diet, which can be something like 30-35% calories from fats, and this is 10 to 20. So does it remove oils? Is that the case?
Right. So this is a diet surrounded around whole plant foods.
Yeah.
And so we're not talking about refined grains. We're not talking about oils or protein powders. We're talking about getting our macronutrients, our protein, carbs, and fat from whole food sources.
Okay, great. Okay, so how can changing diet, I just wanted to cover these 3 areas that we're kind of tasked to address, and ask the same question for all 3, but how can changing diet impact those diagnosed with diabetes?
So there's 2 types of diabetes, but 85-90% of people have type 2 diabetes. That's the diabetes that tends to rise later in life, so-called insulin. So I mean, some people are in childhood typically develop something called type 1 diabetes, and they are forever forced to take insulin injections for the rest of their life. But type 2 diabetes is not that your body can't create insulin, the hormone that decreases your blood sugars, but your body is resistant to the effects of the insulin your body produces. And that insulin resistance can be reversed by the same diet that reverses heart disease, as long with weight loss if you have excess weight. So insulin resistance is caused by fat clogging up the cells in your liver and muscles predominantly, and that interferes with their ability to respond to insulin. That fat can come from 2 places: from your mouth, from your eating it, or from your midsection, your visceral fat, your deep abdominal fat stores for people who have excess fat that can overflow into the blood even if you're eating a very healthy diet. So the combination of weight loss plus this same kind of healthier plant-based diet can drive type 2 diabetes into remission, essentially reversing the disease where you have normal blood sugars on a normal diet and no longer fit the definition of diabetes.
Okay, and so again, we're talking here now about a plant-based, whole food plant-based diet as the way of kind of addressing, in this case, the diabetes issue. I mean, with diabetes, it's often been said just losing weight is enough to make somebody not diabetic. And one of the most effective diets to lose weight would be the ketogenic diet, another diet that gets a lot of airplay here in the UK, and a number of very popular doctors support the ketogenic diet. Are there any issues with the ketogenic diet in addressing somebody who's got type 2 diabetes?
Yeah, so that's the opposite kind of diet, right? If insulin resistance is caused by fat, the last thing you want to do is put a lot of fat in your mouth. In particular, we're talking about saturated fat, which is the primary cause of insulin resistance, which is the primary cause of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. The weight loss that you lose switching to a ketogenic diet is initially mostly water weight, and you actually and lean mass. Your body actually starts cannibalizing your own protein because it's missing its primary fuel, carbohydrates. And the single diet that's been proven most effective in the peer-reviewed medical literature that didn't require exercise or enforced portion control is a whole food plant-based diet, the so-called broad study out of New Zealand. No other study have people lost more weight than eating the same healthy diet that'll reverse type 2 diabetes.
Okay, great. So we're saying for diabetics, the most powerful diet that's been recorded is a whole food, low-fat, plant-based diet in terms of, turning the ship around.
Though what you said at the beginning, weight loss by any means can reverse diabetes, that's true. So fasting, not eating anything, water-only fasting can reverse type 2 diabetes, but you do not want to do that without close physician supervision. And it's kind of the ultimate in unsustainability. And so it's better to just, in my eyes, go on a healthier diet, something that you can sustain long-term.
Okay. And so coming to the second one, coronary heart disease, how can changing diet impact those diagnosed with coronary heart disease? You touched upon your grandmother's story, of course. So it's a very real possibility then that the diet can, I don't know, is reverse the right term to use, reverse and completely manage coronary heart disease?
Reverse is the right term, both in structure and function. You can open up arteries without drugs, without surgery, just with the same a whole food plant-based diet, as well as in improving function by particular, for example, the nitrates in dark green leafy vegetables can improve the ability of your arteries to dilate, and so improving the function of your cardiovascular system as well as its structure. You can prove this using PET scans, angiography, or just clinically by people feeling so much better, their angina going away, this crushing chest pain, or their claudication going away, which is this cramping calf pain you get with peripheral artery disease. One of the reasons so many different diseases can be prevented, arrested, or reversed with a plant-based diet is because a plant-based diet is an artery-healthy diet. It decreases the three things that increase your LDL cholesterol, which is the primary risk factor for coronary artery disease. That's saturated fat, trans fats, dietary cholesterol. By decreasing those, you decrease your LDL, you pull cholesterol from the linings of your arteries, and can reverse the brew of inflammation that eventually can close off one of your arteries in your brain, cause a stroke, or one of the arteries in your heart. But look, all your organs need a healthy blood flow to bring nutrients and oxygen, get rid of waste products. So a heart healthy diet is a brain healthy diet, and a kidney healthy diet, and a liver healthy diet, not only because it improves blood flow, but also because a plant-based diet is essentially synonymous with an anti-inflammatory diet. And we now know that there's an inflammatory component to many different diseases, including heart disease and type 2 diabetes.
Okay, interesting. Inflammation is a topic or a term that keeps on coming up time and time again. So, and related to kind of inflammation, or maybe not actually. Maybe you can give us a bit of an understanding of this. But what are antioxidants? Where can they be found? And antioxidants, are they different to anti-inflammatories?
They are, although they are related. And I can certainly explain that. So many diseases have an oxidant stress component. Oxidant stress is an imbalance between the amount of free radicals, pro-oxidants you have in your body, and the antioxidants. Now, most of your antioxidant defenses are actually inherent. We have antioxidant enzymes that can detoxify free radicals, which are not only a consequence of living in our modern world with all sorts of oxidant stresses coming from, air pollution and diesel fumes and on down the list, but also just a natural byproduct of metabolism. We have inherent antioxidant defenses, but we can kind of commandeer antioxidants from the plant world. Plants, particularly, so for example, dark green leafies, are packed with antioxidants because that's where photosynthesis takes place, which is creates a firestorm of free radicals. The reason that plants don't get sunburned is because they're packed with antioxidants. We can eat those, and those antioxidants get deposited in our skin, deposited in our organs, have the same antioxidant effect, so oxidant stress contributes to cataracts, and heart disease and kidney disease, and accelerated aging, on down the list. And so we can tip the balance by eating antioxidant rich foods, which is berries, are the most antioxidant rich fruit, dark green leafy vegetables, most antioxidant rich vegetable, and spices. So on a kind of gram per gram basis, spices actually have more antioxidants than berries, more antioxidants than anything. And so even just a little pinch of common spices like oregano or peppermint or turmeric or cumin can dramatically improve the antioxidant power of a particular meal.
Okay. I mean, just with regards to that, in terms of spices, obviously something that we South Asians make quite good use of, let's say. What would you say are the most powerful, if there are such a thing, the most powerful spices that we could incorporate into our meals? Which ones would you look towards?
The most powerful would be turmeric and ginger.
Oh, really?
And actually, ironically, dried ginger actually has more antioxidant power than fresh ginger. It's because there's a class of compounds called shogils, which are dehydration products of ginger, actually not present in the fresh fruit, but created when ginger is dried, and actually has properties that fresh ginger doesn't. This is now switching to kind of the anti-inflammatory side. The most anti-inflammatory food in the so-called dietary inflammatory index is turmeric, number one. And the most anti-inflammatory food component in general is fiber, whereas the most pro-inflammatory components are saturated fat. So again, it's shifting towards eating more plants, fewer animal products and junk, has both an anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. And the way that antioxidants and anti-inflammatories are related is that oxidative stress, these free radicals, can actually damage proteins in our body and actually change the way they look to our immune system. And our immune system can attack these these disfigured proteins that are disfigured by free radicals as if they're some kind of foreign entity. And that creates this kind of smoldering inflammation that can contribute to chronic disease. And so we should eat an antioxidant rich and anti-inflammatory diet. And that is, again, diet centered around whole plant foods. But remember, this is not talking about vegetarianism. This is not talking about veganism. You can eat a horrible vegan diet centered around soda and chips and God knows what. We actually have to eat our vegetables. It's these whole foods. that grow out of the ground, food as grown. These are our healthiest choices.
Okay, so let me just try and revisit that for a second. So you're saying the most inflammatory compound that we know is saturated fats, which is predominantly found in animal foods. It's worthwhile saying. The most anti-inflammatory, I don't know what term you use there, compound is fiber.
Fiber. And you say, wait a second, fiber? I mean, we think of fiber as just kind of bulking up stool, helping with intestinal regularity, but no, fiber acts as a prebiotic. Fiber is broken down, is not digested in our digestive tract, in our small intestine, makes it down to our colon, and acts as a prebiotic to feed our good gut bugs. And the products of that fiber digestion in our colon, these short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, are then absorbed into our bloodstream from our colon, circulate throughout our bodies, and have anti-inflammatory effects.
Beautiful. And is there a difference between soluble fiber and insoluble fiber? Or has that not been studied?
Only in what happens when you put them in water. That's really kind of an artificial chemical distinction. The only helpful distinction I would make is isolated fiber supplements, something like psyllium or metamucil, versus fiber found in whole foods. Unfortunately, the psyllium or the brand name Metamucil, that type of fiber is not can't be eaten by your gut bugs. It's non-fermentable. And so while it can certainly bulk up your stool, it cannot provide sustenance for your friendly flora.
Oh, interesting. And so then, and also you mentioned that in terms of the vegetables, antioxidants, leafy green vegetables, dark leafy green vegetables are the place to go. In terms of fruit, the richest in antioxidants tends to be berries. And in terms of spices, you mentioned turmeric and ginger, which incidentally are from the same family, aren't they? Which would include galangal, I think, as well in Thailand. I actually thought you might, because I've read your book, so I thought you might have mentioned Amla.
Well, I normally I'm speaking to normie audiences, these very Western audiences that have never heard of Indian gooseberries. But you are absolutely 100% right. Amla is the most antioxidant concentrated food on planet Earth, and so what a crazy quote unquote coincidence that the single most antioxidant rich food on planet Earth just so happens to be, one of the kind of foundational components of Ayurvedic medicine, for example, the traditional medicine system in India, and used for all sorts of things before we came up with randomized controlled trials and can actually show the power. So I actually recommend people eat Amla every day. I certainly do. Recommend it. And I'm so glad you brought it up because it's something that, I mean, I'm lucky if I can get most of my audiences. They've never heard of turmeric, right? I have to explain that's what makes curry powder yellow. And so I forgot we're talking graduate level nutrition here, and Amla is definitely on that list.
And how would you recommend taking Amla? Does it make a difference if it's dried or powdered or what have you?
Maybe you can actually give me some tips. I find so. I mean, it has it is astringent and bitter and sour, and it is tough to take. So I recommend people put it. Add it to smoothies, something that is very flavorful to kind of mask the taste. But for those who don't like smoothies or think it harms the smoothies, one thing you can actually do is, it sounds a little funny, but use something called edible film. So edible film is basically just potato starch, which is laid out in these little transparent sheets. It's kind of paper thin that you see through, and you get little round cutouts of it. And then you can put any noxious powder in it. So if you really don't like the taste of turmeric, but it's really healthy, you don't like the taste of amla, but it's really healthy, you put a dollop in this little, and you roll it up like a dumpling or a wonton, dip it in water, and it self-seals, and then you can swallow it, and you don't taste it. And so you can, in my new upcoming book, How Not to Age, I talk about long pepper, which is kind of in the black pepper family. It has a anti-aging component to it, but again, it has a kind of a Szechuan pepper numbing sensation. Not for everybody, but this is the way you can get it into your body without tasting.
Okay, interesting. And one final thing, just because I've got you here on the Amla thing, the studies around Amla, are they around fresh Amla or are they around powdered Amla?
So I'm so glad. Yeah, I didn't answer your question before. So dried Indian gooseberry powder, Amla, as opposed to getting it. Well, I can't get it fresh, but I can find it frozen. But the studies were done with dried Amla and sometimes even Amla extracts, which have some kind of patented formula. But most studies were just done with plain Amla, like 800 milligrams would be like a quarter of a teaspoon of Amla. So we're just talking about the powder, which is just dirt cheap, even where I am, and has these just extraordinary properties.
Okay, great. So powdered Amla better to go. The studies are based around the powdered Amla anyway, rather than the fresh Amla.
And so
also,
maybe fresh is better. Maybe, we don't know.
We just haven't studied it.
But look, the studies are done with the powdered, so I take the powder.
Okay, and with ginger as well, it seems that, which is probably more widely studied, that the dried ginger has some components within it that aren't present within fresh ginger, and that's worthwhile kind of looking towards. Okay, great. So does antioxidants equal anti-cancer?
Not always, but in general. So there's some called you can measure either the antioxidant content of one's diet or the antioxidant power of one's bloodstream, and the higher it is, the lower your cancer rates in general. Although specific cancers may buck the trend in general, if you're talking about total cancer rates, significantly lower among those people who eat more antioxidant-rich foods or have higher levels of antioxidants in their bloodstream.
Okay, all right. So there seem it's not causal, let's say, at the moment, but we can see a link between people who consume more antioxidants and lower rates of cancer.
And the same with an anti-inflammatory diet. But you can see how it would be difficult to tease out causality, because antioxidant-rich foods and anti-inflammatory foods are really healthy foods. So maybe there's all sorts of other components of blueberries and kale and other foods that are contributing to the anti-cancer properties, and not necessarily the antioxidants or the anti-inflammatory compounds themselves.
Okay. Okay, great. Nutrition is still a young and expanding field, I guess, is one of the takeaways from this.
I learn something every day and try to pass it along.
And then, should people take supplements, Dr. Greger, or should nutrition come solely from food?
Well, it depends on who you are. And so, for example, pregnant women, alcoholics, there's a number of people that have specific needs in terms of supplements. In terms of the general public, people who are eating healthy diets need to ensure a regular, reliable source of vitamin B12. And those getting inadequate sunlight, for example, those living in the UK during the winter months, really should get a supplemental source of vitamin D. So I recommend 2,000 international units of vitamin D3 for anyone getting inadequate sun exposure.
Okay. I mean, one issue with supplements is they're largely unregulated. It's an unregulated industry. How can we trust supplement manufacturers that you're getting the B12 that you're paying for, or the vitamin D that you're paying for?
Fantastic question. It is a poorly regulated is a very very nice way to put it. Right. And yeah, so I talk a lot about that, certainly on nutritionfacts.org. But one thing you can do is get a USP certified brand. So it's a third party independent tester. Now, that doesn't mean, so a USP certified supplement doesn't mean it's good for you. All it is saying that what's on the label is proven to be what's actually in the capsule, the same dose, the same. And so now, but of course, it could be some terrible thing that no one should be taking, and it could still be USP certified. But at least you are taking the terrible thing and not some other random thing that they put in there, or that has contaminants, or it's the wrong dose, etc.
Okay, I've got to say that's something I've not come across before. I'll have to look out for it in the future. USP certified is is what we're looking for in terms of supplements. I don't know where the time's gone, Dr. Gregor. I know you're a very busy man and you've got a string of interviews to come after this one. I can't thank you enough for joining me at Fever FM today. Hopefully it's going to be a really insightful interview and our listeners will take good value away from it.
So happy to help. Looking forward to coming back.
Thank you so much for all the good work that you do. And I absolutely look forward to the chance to speak to you again, sir.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Dr. Gregor. Bye-bye.